Hey, if you're a fan of my content, could you subscribe real fast? I'm this close to 30,000, and you could be part of that. What is there to say about Super Smash Bros. Ultimate that hasn't been already? Huge deal, critically acclaimed, highest-selling fighting game ever, raised the concept of platform fighters and fighting game crossovers to new heights. You've heard all of this. But with the game over 5 years old now, oh boy, enough time has passed that its blemishes have become more apparent. The rough in the diamonds, so to speak. Let's talk about a few of them, constructively, ranging from the uneven content to the trend shift in fighter designs to a certain big picture problem that dragged down the entire fan experience. So, mentally prepared? Let's begin. First, let's talk about Ultimate's biggest selling point. The fact that every playable fighter and almost every stage in Smash history was here. It framed the game as this huge celebration of how far the series had come. And seeing characters that hadn't been around in years with newly updated models and animations captured a lot of gamers' attention. But what if I told you this huge celebration actually had consequences on the development end? Let's talk side content, extra modes, stadium, etc. Each Smash game has included other stuff to do when you're not up for regular matches. As we got to Melee and then Brawl, more of this type of content was used to keep the gameplay fresh. Alternate rule sets, event matches, target test, home run contest, stage builder, all-star mode, and an adventure mode to top it off. All with an extensive list of trophies to collect as rewards. Yet as Smash kept growing, the new content stopped hitting as hard. Smash Run was a highlight of Smash 4's 3DS version, but Smash Tour and Special Orders, not so much. 50-50 chance you forgot the latter even existed. We also saw Target Test replaced with something that, while easier to make, was a lot more forgettable. And Ultimate? It didn't even have several staple modes until a while after launch, and some it never got, like a boss rush mode. And its own adventure is just a long series of fights with gimmick rules. Fine in short bursts, but can become a slog the longer you play at a time. Don't worry, I'm not saying old Smash good, new Smash bad. Every Smash title since the first has had something limit the scope of their development, and Ultimate had some cool side content. Squad Strike was a great idea that'll hopefully get expanded on next game, and seeing the Spirit Battles homage their characters in clever ways can be pretty fun when you're not overwhelmed by the sheer number of them. But the more the series has gone on, the fewer in number, shallower in scope, or more delayed this side content has become. And it's not just that. Ultimate's base game was short on new major content too. We'd gotten a lot of full, non-clone newcomers in previous entries, 12 of them plus the Mii's in Smash 4's base game, and if you count Pokemon Trainer's team as 3, Brawl technically had 18. So when Ultimate launched with only 6 full newcomers, it was disappointing. Especially for fans of, Waluigi or Bandana D, or several others who felt like they'd been locked out prematurely. Only getting 4 new stages was also disappointing. Not as much as the lower newcomer count, but not having Gangplank Galleon or Ultra Space or etc. as new stages still felt like missed potential. While this isn't 100% confirmed, here's my theory. With the Wii U syncing and Nintendo jumping ship to a new console ahead of schedule, they wanted to make absolutely sure the Switch gained as much momentum as possible in its first couple years. This including getting its own Smash Bros. Title out the door quickly, holiday 2018 at the latest. But not only did they need this one done a few months faster than the usual 3 years and change dev cycle, they needed a hook, something big Nintendo's marketing could swing for the fences with. And so they decided everyone would be here, no matter what it took. And it took a lot out of the developers. Time, resources, negotiating with other companies for third-party licensing, it all adds up. And in order to keep the game on schedule, the sacrifices had to be made, in the form of less base game content than we'd had since Smash 64, set aside because making Everyone Is Here possible was that much of a strain on development, a calculated risk that hoped DLC and post-launch updates could fill in the gaps eventually. These cracks in the facade show up elsewhere too. Several Smash Veterans movesets have aged poorly or had glaring issues pop up, but most were left unaddressed because there was no time or hands available. little hang-ups with the gameplay never got touched up, like how much of a hassle it can be to quickly run off or drop through platforms, or the overly generous buffer window that treats held inputs like they were just pressed, which can turn an attempt to shield or tech an impact into an offstage dodge online because the player held R half a second prior and the input delay assumed it was still being held. And the safer attacks overall, combined with the game's questionable netcode, makes reacting to people online and punishing stuff properly way harder than it was supposed to be. The netcode thing is more of a Switch hardware problem, but Ultimate had little chance to account for it because they needed the resources elsewhere. And on the newcomers side, while several fan favorites finally got a chance, several more favorites and rising stars abruptly got left out. And when DLC took a heavy turn toward big-name third parties, with the only Nintendo newcomers being ones that were explicitly too late to make the base game, most of those fans who got left out originally remained left out. By focusing hard on veterans for the base game, then going for broke with surprise guests and recent first parties with DLC, out of apparent fear that anything less might not get enough attention, it left a lot of other fans out in the cold, where they still are to an extent. Everyone is here might have been a big deal, but in practice, it was a double-edged sword, and more was left behind in the process, modes, features, quality of life improvements, than I think people realize. But let's take a detour first. There's something else that caused some problems, especially as Ultimate's DLC went on. Smash's fighter designs have gone through evolution over time. The first game was still figuring out its identity, so its movesets were janky. You had attacks that didn't make sense in their slots, like Kirby's up air hitting on all sides of him. Yeah, that was his up air originally. You had some specials that didn't make sense in context, like Link using a boomerang when he couldn't as an adult in Ocarina of Time. Sakurai didn't find out until it was too late, because most of Smash 64's development happened before Ocarina's finished. You had several specials that were completely made up to fit an intended archetype. Shout out to DK and everything other than hand slap. And everyone had a held kick for their neutral air. Everyone. But as Smash developed as a franchise, several, though not all, veterans' movesets were touched up to fix the rough spots and feel more in character. And each game's newcomers felt more and more inspired, emphasizing standout abilities and techniques from their source material and weaving it into their fighter designs. But they were still pretty restrained. The really complicated characters were few and far between. With Smash 4, though, that started changing. This was the point where more newcomers started being more overtly based on their games. Little Mac's heavy focus on grounded combat, Robin's weapon durability, the Mii fighters being super customizable, creative characters, etc. Not only was it a way to capture the essence of those characters more closely, it helped ensure they'd stand out on a roster that just kept growing. But some characters took it extra far, with every aspect of their stats, moves, and mechanics built to feel as one-to-one to their source material as possible. Mega Man moves, animates, and even jumps exactly like in his games, and has an extreme focus on projectiles, with his Mega Buster taking up 3 move slots in one continuous, long-range source of chip damage. DLC introduced Ryu, with his light and heavy tilt variants, command inputs for his specials, extremely rigid air movement, and a unique cancel-based combo system, all designed to feel like he walked right out of Street Fighter into Smash 4. And then there's Bayonetta, with so many unique mechanics and details directly lifted from her games that a lot of broken stuff slipped through the cracks even after a couple patches. And Ultimate leaned even harder on that style of design. By the time all was said and done, a majority of its DLC fighters had some additional complex mechanic, with several built to feel like one-to-one transfers from their games. While several other newcomers had simpler unique mechanics, or none at all, the complicated stuff wasn't the exception anymore, it was the norm. Well, what's the problem with that, you might be wondering? For a casual fan who mostly likes to watch, it can be really cool to see all these characters with very different builds clashing against each other. But from a player's standpoint, it starts getting dicey. Imagine someone who likes picking Ultimate back up every now and then, who wants to try out the DLC characters as they come out. And now, suddenly, most of these characters have so much of a learning curve that it can take days of practice just to feel like you know what you're doing with them. To say no less of how hard it can be to understand how some of this stuff works. For example, Sephiroth's winged form activates based on a weird formula dependent on his stock total and current percent compared to his opponents, goes away after losing a stock or inflicting a varying amount of damage and/or KOs, and grants him buffed mobility, 1.3 times damage, a third jump, and armor on specifically his smash attacks. How is a casual player ever supposed to figure all of that out, other than getting lucky with the mini guides on the loading screens, or saying screw it and going out of their way to look it up and memorize it? Doesn't that ruin the whole point of Smash trying to be approachable and beginner-friendly? A fighting game that is also a party game? And it becomes a problem competitively too. The more extra mechanics you pile onto a character, the exponentially tougher it gets to keep them from being too strong or too weak. And even when they are balanced well, the way they can come off as cheating Smash's conventions can make them demoralizing to play against if not handled very carefully. That's the thing. You can't just design new characters in fighting games around how it feels to play as them. You also need to think about how it feels to play against them. And Ultimate eventually forgot that. Which has led to the current state of the metagame. While not as unbalanced as Brawl or Smash 4, several of the characters atop Ultimate's meta right now, or those one step below but still prominent, are these mechanically complex characters who had some kind of unbalanced jank slip through the cracks. True, the diminishing player morale isn't all their fault. A slow drop-off in player interest is normal for a 5-year-old fighting game. And true, the pandemic getting bad right at the start of Fighters Pass 2 definitely affected the devs' ability to fix potential problems. They were scrambling just to finish in time while adjusting to working remotely. But it still feels like they shot for the moon making these DLC characters as wildly designed as possible, in hopes, again, of catching as much attention as they could, deciding they'd deal with the balance issues later. Except, Ultimate's balance patches were not great. Most were too scattershot for their own good, handing out seemingly random buffs to random moves on damn near random characters. Some fighters who were widely considered low tier from the start barely got any help at all, while some who were already considered high tier got buffed substantially, and the actual nerfs were few and far between. I know it's never fun making a character weaker, but at some point it's just easier to nerf 8 to 10 top tiers than to buff 60 other characters instead. Yet for Ultimate's entire run of patches, we only saw actual substantial metagame affecting nerfs to 6 characters, while several top tiers with memetically powerful tools went completely untouched. Smash 4's balance patches were focused enough to address the worst of the problems that popped up, except at the very end. But Ultimates felt like the team behind them wasn't fully paying attention, leaving the meta to coast on how well put together the base game's balancing was, which led to a whole lot of stuff that popped up over time getting left to fester indefinitely. I have to wonder, how much of this was the devs losing the proverbial plot, and how much was an intentional creative choice that got out of hand? Was the massive emphasis on buffs over nerfs meant to maintain excitement for as many players as possible? Well, it didn't, since most of the buffs were too unfocused to breathe new life into those characters, and the few nerfs didn't refresh the meta much at all. Was the big uptick in one-to-one faithful moveset designs meant to draw in fans of the games the characters came from? Fans who hadn't played Smash before? Was the hope that they'd offset any casual players who got overwhelmed by the influx of difficult newcomers? We have no idea if this was the case, or if it worked. But whatever the cause, it came with consequences that have rotted away at Ultimate's edges over time. Is it still fun to play? Sure. But because the devs focused on making so many fighters feel a little too faithful to their source material, there's a greater chance any given player will have to learn how they work intricately, even if just to stand a chance against them. And the mishandled balancing surrounding them has created a bitter aftertaste that's grown harder and harder to ignore. Smash newcomer speculation is a tradition at this point. Every time a new game gets announced, Nintendo fans everywhere, and fans of third-party series now too, band together to talk about who they think will make it and who they want most. But a combination of factors, some on the developer's end, some not, turned speculation for Ultimate's newcomers utterly toxic the further we went. You thought this was just about the game and its developers? Let me tell you about one aspect the community made worse. Let me tell you a story of what happens when a fandom gets consumed by its own hype. To set the stage, let's begin at the beginning. Ultimate got announced in March 2018, revealing its existence in dramatic fashion. Sakurai and the devs went all out teaming up with Nintendo's marketers to make this thing feel like as big a deal as possible, like the Ultimate Smash Bros. Game. Again, possibly to make absolutely sure it sold copies and moved consoles. Everyone is here? Check. One of the biggest fan requests for the last 3 games? Check. Popular third-party requests that got a lot of ballot support? Check. Using Echo Fighters to throw a lifeline to characters who missed their chance before? Check. The other biggest fan request for the last 3 games? Check. At this point, players and fans started to assume the big news would keep coming indefinitely. But it didn't. The devs and marketers dropped all of the biggest news early on and overextended. Turned out the only newcomers left for the base game were a very safe pick with a very safe moveset, an Echo Fighter everyone already expected once Richter was confirmed, and the token Pokemon newcomer, who was divisive and less supported among Pokemon fans than several others from Gen 7. And a post-launch bonus that was an oddball from way out of left field that already disappointed fans did not take well at first. Especially when that same presentation revealed that so many other characters that were still actively supported had been relegated to assist trophies or Mii costumes. You see, Smash fans tend to overreact to whatever the most recent reveal is. Any newcomer is treated not just as a major event, but also as a harbinger of things to come. And anytime a popular request gets deconfirmed, a lot of folks assume they must have been deemed unworthy of being playable. While yes, the assist trophy rollout really could have been handled more gracefully, probably should have spread the big deconfirms out more to soften the blow, or gotten the ones with heavy support out of the way early to rip the bandage off sooner when it'd be less painful, saving the weirder ones for later. But the Smash fandom really doesn't learn lessons very well, so they kept overreacting, causing a whole lot of collateral damage even to other fans who weren't impacted. But then Ultimate's DLC opened with a shocker of a first pick, the community overreacted again, and that lingering bitterness was pushed to the back burner to stew while people focused on what had just happened. Instead of treating Joker's inclusion like a welcome surprise, an awful lot of the community treated it as a new benchmark, while extrapolating from official word that some characters you wouldn't expect could show up now. In their minds, the proverbial floodgates had been opened, and now a growing number of people believed every subsequent character needed to come from beyond those gates. And when the next 2 reveals were characters Japan and the West, respectively, lost their damn minds over, the community decided their wildest ideas must have been confirmed. Ultimate had already been leaning into generating hype as a marketing tool. The emphasis on everyone and everything returning, the fulfillment of so many long-running requests, the greater spectacle behind each newcomer revealed, the way each new franchise that joined in was given this extra pomp and circumstance. The game's very framing and promotional material shifted as DLC went on, from the Ultimate Smash Bros. Title to the ultimate celebration of gaming. Some people within the Smash fandom had already been treating the roster like it was supposed to be a quote-quote Nintendo Hall of Fame, demanding and sometimes expecting newcomers to be chosen based on who, in their minds, did or didn't deserve such an honor. But now, a growing number of them decided the roster needed to become a Hall of Fame for all of gaming. If anyone was on the table, then only the absolute biggest stars from any gaming company should be allowed, or so they decided. Now Ultimate needed to collect as many of them as possible, and couldn't be this celebration of gaming unless it did. Wanting a character in Smash to play as them had become secondary to wanting them in just to say they were on the roster. Nintendo had played with fire, and now much of the community had become enthralled by the flames. And the spectacle, the hype surrounding it all, attracted a new group of speculators who only cared about chasing that spectacle. A combination of fans of seemingly deconfirmed characters who wanted something else to get excited over, and some people who just wanted to watch the reveals and ride the emotions like they were watching the latest blockbuster film. These hype beasts, as I've called them sometimes, now cared more about the reveal trailers than about actually playing the game, but still wanted the newcomers to cater to them too. And the more DLC went on, the more this sentiment spread throughout the fan base. Slowly but surely, any and all newcomer talk got taken over, revolving more and more around which impossible barrier could get shattered next, which of the biggest stars in all of gaming deserved to get in next regardless of practicality, or whose hypothetical reveal trailers could make the collective internet lose their damned minds the most. Instead of the excitement towards supporting a character being a means to an end of wanting to play as them in Smash Bros., now that excitement was an end, satisfying those fans' need to have something to hype over, but only for a while, until the buzz died down and speculation spun right back toward who could go even further, set off even more hype. And if you were still openly polling for a character who wouldn't do that, for fans of any lower key picks, eventually including every first-party Nintendo character, you might as well have been putting a target on your back. Don't get me wrong, I am not saying all the fans of the big-name characters were like this. I also saw a lot of people who genuinely cared about those characters, and saw this as a chance to combine two of their favorite series together and play as them in Smash. But they got caught up in this mess too. They got dragged along by people outside their support base who were just using their favorites as an opportunity to have something to get excited about. And when we got newcomers who didn't fit these lofty expectations, things got ugly. Literally, who is this? Who wanted this weird guy with the hat and funny accent from an old fighting game? Why are we getting another character from a recent anime RPG when we could have gotten bigger stars who've been waiting for longer instead? How dare they pick another Fire Emblem character now after so many it already has? Those rumors said we were going to get someone wild. This isn't exciting. Where's the hype? So much of the community got so hostile and tribal that it was difficult to be around. I can only imagine how many people felt like they couldn't talk about characters they cared about anymore without drawing the aggro of the hype beasts and getting harassed for not wanting what the loudest members of the fandom were demanding, much less the people who actually liked playing as the newcomers that saw so much hate. Those 3/4 I mentioned a minute ago, all of them are pretty commonly played to this day. Even now, over 2 years after DLC wrapped up with as satisfying a finish as the devs could manage, I still see the after effects of this hype culture in the Smash community. I still see people demanding or expecting Smash 6, whenever it happens, to raise the stakes even further because they can't imagine anything else being worth bothering with. All they can think of now about this series is in terms of spectacle and hype. I don't know what Smash's future will be like. Those of you who've been here a while know I hope Smash 6 is a soft reboot that tones things down and focuses on being new and different. Hopefully Nintendo, Sakurai, and everyone involved saw how fans overreacted to Ultimate's reveals and account for that by establishing new ground rules right away, so fans know what to expect before ever jumping to conclusions. But I also hope the Smash community can learn from its own mistakes, myself included. I have said plenty of head-ass stuff before while attempting to defend my own most wanted characters. We're all getting older now, especially those of us who've been around this community on and off for almost 20 years. It won't be easy, but maybe we could surprise everyone by not hyping out of control next time. So, those are the 3 biggest criticisms I have about Ultimate, past and present. The decision to pull off Everyone is Here diverted resources to make it possible, leading to less new content and fewer quality of life improvements. The choice to make more and more newcomers feel as one-to-one true to their source material as possible gave more characters off-putting learning curves and traits that were harder to balance than ever, not helped by the game's balance patches dropping the ball. And the fandom's overreaction and misinterpretation toward the reveals led to what I swear was like a collective addiction to hype, affecting enough of the community that it turned the fan experience more toxic than ever before. Hopefully there's room to learn and make things better next time. Hopefully enough higher-ups have noticed these flaws that they can be addressed when Smash 6 rolls around. Or who knows, maybe there'll be a chance to fix some of this sooner than we think. While I believe a port of Ultimate for the Switch's successor console is too impractical to happen licensing-wise, maybe there could be some kind of next-gen update for the version we have already. Crazier things have happened, right? Special thanks for this video to these people here. Thanks in particular to my patrons for continuing to support me, despite my own flaws. Means a lot that you're still here. So, until next time, take a deep breath and relax for a bit. We could all use less to stress over.